Tammy from Country Diggers here. Today we're going to be talking about the Battle of Crooked Creek, Days Gap, and Hog Mountain. It's a Civil War battle known as Streight raid with the Union, Abel Streight, and Confederate Nathan Bedford Forrest. And also I'll be showing some pictures of the Crooked Creek Museum. Fred Wise on that. I think he died in 2021. And me and Tara went there one time hoping to see the museum, and we didn't. All we had was our card on us, and they took cash. So only $5 though to get in, but we didn't have any cash, and we didn't want to do the ATM stuff and all that. And then we went the other day, and it was closed. I don't know when they'll open back up. After he died, they closed it for some reason. I guess his family did. But he owned the Crooked Creek Civil War Museum, and he bought the land in 1981 and learned it was an actual battle site 4 years later. So I'll show you some pictures of that. The museum pictures are from the internet. I have some pictures of my own that I'll be showing with Clarkson Covered Bridge and Crooked Creek. So stay tuned for it. It's going to be all right, this is Streight raid into Alabama. Streight raid, a Civil War campaign conducted by U.S. Army Colonel Abel D. Streight from April 19th to May 3rd, 1863, to destroy portions of the Western and Atlantic Railroad, had little effect upon Federal attempts to defeat the Confederate Army of Tennessee. Its principal significance lies in the legends that grew up around Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest's capture of Streight and his men with the aid of Emma Sampson near the present-day city of Gadsden, Alabama. Streight, a native of New York, owned a printing company and lumber yard in Indianapolis, Indiana, and was a Republican Party member who openly espoused abolitionist sympathies. He enlisted in the Federal Army days after Confederates fired upon Fort Sumter. In July 1862, Streight served as part of a federal occupation force in northern Alabama. During this brief period, he continually interacted with North Alabama Unionists, as those who remained loyal to the United States were known, and recruited many into the Federal Army. He greatly overestimated their numbers, and this misconception, shared by many federal military commanders and President Abraham Lincoln, jeopardized the planned raids by U.S. Army troops months before they began. In March 1863, U.S. Army Major General William Stark Roskins ordered Streight to organize a provincial brigade to conduct a mounted raid across North Alabama and into northwest Georgia, where it would strike the Western and Atlantic Railroad, one of the Confederate Army of Tennessee's supplies arteries located in northwest Georgia. Streight's brigade contained portions of the 1st West Tennessee and 1st Alabama USA Cavalry regiments, and the 3rd Ohio, 51st Indiana, 73rd Illinois, and the 80th Illinois Infantry regiments, totaling approximately 1,700 soldiers. Lacking horses, a majority of Streight's infantry instead mounted temperamental mules, recently procured from farms in western Tennessee. Many of the mules were unbroken. old and incapable of carrying their riders for great distances without frequent stops. The amused onlookers who watched the large mass of Federal soldiers riding mules through the countryside embarrassed the men and slowed their movement. During the raid, Confederates hurled insults towards the brigade, referring to them as the jackass cavalry. Undoubtedly, the lack of horses had a negative effect on troop morale. Mules were not the only problem. The raid's success also depended upon Brigadier General Grenville Dodge's ability to screen Straight's movements from Confederate cavalry commanded by General Forrest, as well as cavalry led by Colonel Robert Rodery, both part of the Army of Tennessee. On April 19, 1863, Straight's brigade boarded several boats at Nashville that transported the force southward on the Tennessee River and disembarked at Eastport, Mississippi. That night, a stampede scattered approximately 400 of the brigade's mules into the surrounding countryside, causing a delay as Streight waited in Eastport for a shipment of mules. 2 days later, Streight rendezvoused with Dodge and his 8,000 cavalrymen and moved towards Tuscumbia in Colbert County. During the march, skirmishers who had detached from Forrest's division impeded Federal movements. At Tuscumbia, Streight and Dodge separated, with Streight riding towards Moulton in Lawrence County, and Dodge screening the movements by heading north in the hopes of distracting Forrest and Roddy. As Streight left Tuscumbia late on April 26th, a heavy rainstorm made the roads virtually impossible, forcing him to make an unscheduled stop at Mount Hope in Lawrence County. There, Dodge informed Streight that the two would not meet at Moulton, as previously planned. Dodge reported that his command had driven Forrest to the north, thereby clearing a path for Streight to continue the raid unmolested. Dodge's movements, however, had not deterred Forrest, who closely pursued the Jackass Brigade. As Streight moved eastward, the morale of his command temporarily improved as dry weather and the capture of several Confederate supply wagons bolstered spirits. The mood changed, however, when the U.S. Army scouts spotted Confederates moving along both their right and left flanks, threatening to surround the entire command. These movements led to the Battle of Days Gap, which took place in Coleman County near Sand Mountain. During this fight, Straight's men thwarted Forrest's attempt to surround him from the rear with a series of charges led by the 73rd Illinois and 51st Indiana. Undeterred, a few hours later, Forrest resumed the attack upon Streight, whose men dismounted and occupied a ridge along Hog Mountain in preparation for what they incorrectly believed was a large force. Again, Straight's men repulsed several assaults and then resumed the march at an accelerated pace, which allowed them to successfully ambush a portion of Forrest's cavalry near Bluntsville in Blount County. As Straight's men pressed towards Gadsden, Etowah County, Forrest's constant presence behind the Federal forces prevented Streight from resting his weary troops and mules, which proved too slow to outrun Forrest's horsemen. In addition, their constant braying enabled Forrest's scouts to detect Straight's force from more than 2 miles away. On the afternoon of May 2nd, Streight crossed Black Creek, located 3 miles from Gadsden. Ahead of Forrest and Streight crossed Black Creek, located 3 miles from Gadsden, ahead of Forrest, and burned the only nearby bridge, impeding the Confederate pursuit. Streight soon realized that his cavalry could not outrun Forrest for long, and desperately needed to reach the city of Rome, Georgia. There, Streight intended to fight what he believed to be the numerically superior foe from behind some hastily prepared breastworks. Unbeknownst to him, the actions of two locals thwarted his plans. Unable to use the bridge to cross the swollen Black Creek, Forrest rode to a nearby home to find a guide. He found 16-year-old Emma Sampson, with whose guidance he located the ford, crossed it, and caught up with Straight's forces. Meanwhile, ferry operator John Wisdom came upon the troops, having burned his ferry on the Coosa River at Gadsden, and raced 67 miles to Rome, where he warned residents of the approaching U.S. troops. As a result of his actions, Rome's inhabitants repelled a detachment of Straight's cavalry, sent to occupy a vital bridge crossing the Coosa River, thus blocking the only available route into the city. Streight then turned west towards Cedar in search of another crossing. His exhausted command, however, abandoned the search. At Cedar Bluff, Straight's men stopped for a much-needed rest. Many of the cavalrymen had been walking due to the deaths of numerous mules. To make matters worse, during a recent skirmish, the soldiers learned that the bulk of the ammunition was rendered useless due to the exposure to water. There at Cedar Bluff, Forrest and his 500 men surrounded Streight and his men. Rather than face impossible alienation, Streight decided to surrender his command. During the negotiations, Forrest craftily reaffirmed Straight's misconception that the Confederates greatly outnumbered his brigade. In order to reinforce the ruse, Forrest's artillery repeatedly rode in circles in and out of Straight's view along a neighboring ridge. On May 3, 1863, Streight surrendered, convinced he had been captured by a numerically superior foe. When Forrest's small division appeared following the surrender, Streight angrily demanded his men be allowed to re-engage their surrender, renege their surrender. But Forrest refused. Defeat proved especially bitter for the soldiers of the 1st Alabama Cavalry, the USA side, who had risked their families and homes to defend the United States, despite their state's decision to secede. The Confederates transported Streight and the majority of his brigade to Libby Prison in Richmond, Virginia. During the arduous trip, many of his weary, malnourished soldiers succumbed to disease, and many later died in prison, with approximately 200 lost in total. In 1864, Streight and 107 other prisoners escaped through an inarticulate system of tunnels. Straight's raid was an abysmal failure as a result of inadequate supplies, poor communication among federal commanders, exaggerated estimates of Confederate forces and local Unionists, and bad luck. Whereas Nathan Bedford Forrest and, to a lesser degree, Emma Sampson are credited for foiling the raid. Its failure had less to do with the Confederate actions them the bungling mishaps of their federal counterparts. In the end, the raids failed to disrupt the Army of Tennessee supply lines and had no impact upon the battles fought in Middle Tennessee and Northwest Georgia during the summer and fall of 1863, and they endured a humiliating defeat. In northern Alabama and northwest Georgia, accounts of Forrest's heroics further elevated his already mythical status. In 1908, the city of Rome dedicated the first statue commissioned to honor the famed Confederate cavalryman and first Grand Wizard of the KKK, Ku Klux Klan. Equally important, the state of Alabama and Confederacy acquired a wartime hero, Emma Sampson, whose exploits would later reinforce post-bellum notions that stressed the sacrifices and contributions of Confederate women during a war lost by Southern men. The city of Gaston erected a monument to Sampson in 1906. The Crooked Creek Civil War Museum in Beaumont, Coleman County, preserves the site of the skirmish and interprets its history. Now, what I know of the Crooked Creek Museum and Fred Wise, when he bought that land, he didn't realize that he had a battle site there. And when he realized it, he started preserving it. And most of the things in that museum come from the Crooked Creek area. So if you get a chance, you need to go. It's closed right now, as I said. And I hope it opens back up soon because I want to go. I haven't been. We should have took the chance to go the first time. We should have put our cards in that ATM, okay? But anyway, hope y'all enjoyed and see you back soon. Bye.